Hello and welcome back to this Downful Idealistic Crusade. Today I'm going to be talking about the fifth of the Avon Phantom novels, The Golden Circle. This follows in the same trend as Book 4, so it's written by Frank Shawn again, who wrote most of the books in the series, although it is based on original material by Lee Falk. So pretty much all of these are based on parts of the original newspaper strip. This one is much more of a direct adventure. It is actually, and to describe the plot, it's actually rather simple. The opening is very strong, but essentially the Phantom finds himself sort of coming into a plot that is actually part of the operations of a gang of jewel smugglers. And of course, for the reasons of being a pulp adventure, they're not just a gang of successful jewel smugglers, but it's an all-female band of jewel smugglers. So just picture that in your head already, and you get the idea of the setup of how this is just a fun little adventure romp. What's probably the most striking about this particular novel is the opening. That it's a sort of it throws you right into it because the Phantom is traveling by train and his normal identity of Kit Walker, and just sort of runs smack into to a pair of women, and this beautiful woman just starts throwing herself at him in the sort of darkness of a train at night, and as if they were lovers or something. And this is literally page one, and you're sort of thrown into this with the Phantom himself. But it becomes very quickly apparent that they've actually committed a murder as part of a jewel robbery and managed to escape the train, and then the police show up and start questioning Mr. Walker before he gets away, and he decides to investigate further and figure out what's going on. And then when it's uncovered that it's actually a jewel ring under the name that goes by the Golden Circle, it's also their identifier between members, the Phantom decides he will intervene and break up this ring, because not only are they committing crimes, but there's been a murder committed. Not even for the fact that he himself is sort of suspected for the crime. As with the previous book, we do have a sort of subplot with the police characters being sort of, they're following the trail as well, but also the trail of this mysterious man who seems to appear and reappear at various intervals. It's also interesting that this story actually takes place in America. So this is the Phantom on U.S. shores. It's primarily based around New York, but there's some nice bits of the Phantom operating in American territories or going through towns or things. It's also a nice touch that on the train he's with his famous I hate to say pet because he's so much more than that, but he's with the famous Devil, the wolf companion of the Phantom. And so Devil doesn't play much of a role in this story, but it's kind of amusing that they have to then get off the train, and the Phantom has to find somewhere to board Devil for a time. So just think of the poor small town pet boarding center that just, they say, "Oh, sure, we'll take him," and then it's Devil there. I thought that was such an amusing idea, and also very realistic, because the Phantom knows that you can't just walk into New York with your pet wolf with you, even if he's tame. Very much draw attention to oneself. So that's another fun thing in these books, that you do have to think they do consider practicalities. Another of the great scenes that again is very pulpy but beautifully done. The Phantom gets off the train, but of course he doesn't have his luggage with him, and he needs at least some clothes to then get into New York. So the local patrolman gets sort of spooked when he sees a strange man and a wolf coming out of a clothing store. And then they go in, and there are basically a set of clothes has been taken. But of course, the Phantom would never steal. So of course, there is a significant amount of money that is taped to the cash register. So of course, it's essentially saying, "Sorry, I had to take some clothes while you weren't open. So here's this plus some extra." These books are filled with little bits like that. But that's essentially the setup, and then the Phantom tries to uncover who this group is by investigating various jewel merchants in New York, and you get a nice bit of detective flavor as the Phantom is performing his own investigation sort of simultaneously with the police, who are personified by two rather interesting detective characters who are sort of built out of some typical police detective cliches, but they're drawn well enough that they do become sort of nice characters in and of themselves. While this is going on, the Phantom ingratiates himself into the Jewel Gang once he discovers the nature of the Golden Circle, and then tries to promote himself as being useful. And then there's some nice interplay with the various female members of the gang. They're essentially two who become rather interested in this mysterious Mr. Walker, and he helps them pull off a robbery they're planning in order to get himself in further to then try to bust their operation wide open. So essentially, it's a sort of one man infiltrating a group type story is what it becomes, and you get some nice developments because there are members of the all female gang who don't trust not only Walker, as he's known as, but also because he is a male, and they don't feel the need of having to associate with any men whatsoever unless it's absolutely necessary. So they do sort of, at least the story does sort of play around with the notion of it being an all-female gang, and is run extremely competently and with minimized risk at all times. So it's not just a pulpy idea. It's at least done in enough realistic strokes to actually, it is very plausible, and their base of operations is rather plausible. They're, it's done well. It does seem a bit odd that the Phantom just lets himself be captured multiple times, and but he is sort of trying to play them at their own game and seem like a particular character. This is a sort of idea that runs throughout Pulp Fiction and adventure stories, and it's sort of trying to, of course, infiltrate a gang and play them off against each other. So while it's not two sort of rival gangs that are being played off another, it does have a bit of the classic Dashiell Hammett Red Harvest type setup that, of course, would resurface in Yojimbo and Fistful of Dollars and many other stories. But, of course, it has that License to Kill flavor of where you have Bond infiltrating Sanchez's empire. Here, of course, it's the Phantom infiltrating an all-female band of jewel thieves and smugglers. It is a nice little story. It does have some nice moments to it, but for me, reading this so far of the five, it's probably the one that's the most direct and to the point. It's still a nice story to read, but it's of the five I've read so far, this one is probably, and again, I hate to say the weakest because it's still really enjoyable and has nice Phantom moments throughout. But this one is probably the most direct. I think that's the best way to put it. And again, like all of these, the page count is pretty short, so you can read this in one sitting, and it moves so well that you kind of just want to keep reading it. That's the best part of these. You don't want to stop reading them. It clocks in at about 137 pages, so once it's over, it's pretty much over. These are very to the point, but that's also part of their charm, and they are drawing directly from the original strips, so those, of course, were extremely direct due to the nature of newspaper strip formats in terms of storytelling. So I still heartily recommend this one. It's still really, really fun. I don't think there's a bad one in the bunch in terms of the Avon Phantom novels, but again, of the five so far, I think this is the most direct. Again, we have the reproduction of the original Avon paperback artwork. The art is, again, by the artist George Wilson. Really nice detail here, very, very pulpy in its nature, but we do have elements of the story being depicted. We have the two women who have designs on the Phantom. We have the golden circle pin, that's the way they identify themselves, and that's nicely actually framing some of the characters. We have the crooked fence checking Jules, and of course, Jules just spilling out over the cover. And then we have the climax, or the action moment of the climax, where, of course, one of the ladies and the Phantom are in the death mechanism is, of course, trying to drown them, but in a very elaborate way that there is seemingly no way out of. So we get all kinds of materials here. But interestingly, this is one of the ones where they've actually blocked off the top, or they have the title separated from the actual artwork. It's this way. This is reproducing the original paperback cover, but this is one of the only ones where it's not a full cover image with the title sort of integrated into it. The spine is the same matching white spine as all of the Hermes reprints, and then the back takes the key art and puts it on a nice matching white background with the rest of the books, and then we have the original wonderful blurb on the back. Now, as I've mentioned before, these are much larger than the originals, so this is the only original Avon that I have. So to give you a size difference, that's what you're looking at. Also, the spines do actually recreate the Avon spines, just obviously with the Hermes logo instead of Avon. You can also tell it's very tough to get an Avon copy in good condition. This, of course, has a lot of age-related wear. And these are actually quite pricey and uncommon on the used market. So even though these have a list price of $14.99, you do get a wonderful new reprint. $15 is probably about what you're going to be spending on a decent copy of an Avon book on eBay, if not more, if it's in really good shape. And if you're trying to get a whole set of these, it's actually not a bad idea to get all of the reprints. These are wonderfully done. The breakdown, the text block, the actual binding is really nice. And while I'm not usually a fan of big trade paperbacks, these just have a nice feel in the hands. They're very pleasurable to read. There's no issues whatsoever with any typos or anything like that, which unfortunately is pretty common in a lot of reprints of adventure fiction and pulp material and things. So, these have had time and care put into them, and you really do feel that as you're reading them. So that's another reason why I'm just enjoying these so much, and I decided to start making videos about them, because I kind of want to get the word out there, because the Phantom is unfortunately a very niche character here in the U.S., and I hadn't even known that Hermes had done these and reprinted the whole Avon series. I just found out, a couple years ago that there were Phantom novels, and I'm always looking for anything Phantom I can get my hands on. And then when I saw how pricey and rare these were, I'm like, well, maybe one day I'll find them all. And then I found out about these beautiful reprints. So I do highly recommend checking these out. I will have the link to Hermes' website, where you can order directly from the publisher, which is always helpful to better support independent publishers. But this is a wonderfully done series. All of these books so far have been really fun adventures. They are quick reads, but they are extremely enjoyable reads. And when you get into a series or sort of run of books like this, that they may be simplistic on the surface, but they're really enjoyable, when you're reading something that it's going to be something you're going to return to and you're going to want to return to. So these are not just one-time reads. These are going to be reads that, if you love the character and you like pulp adventures with heart to them, these are going to be stories you're going to return to a lot. They are really fun to read, and I really am enjoying looking at them via the Hermes Press reprints. So that's why I wanted to go over all these in video form. So those are my thoughts on Book 5 of the Avon Phantom novels, The Golden Circle. It's still a wonderfully fun experience reading these. I have enjoyed every single one of the books so far, and I will continue and reading through the Avon Phantoms and making videos on each. These are just so fun. I just felt compelled to start making some video reviews, and anytime I get to talk about the Phantom, I'm hoping to at least generate some discussion and perhaps some interest in the character, because it's very difficult being a Phantom fan here in the U.S. because the options you have are so limited, and so few people are really invested in the character or even know very much about the character. It's unfortunately the same case with all the other classic pulp hero characters, from the Shadow to Doc Savage and so on, all of which without whom any of the big pulp characters, you would just not have the modern comic industry. It just simply would not exist. And it's great getting back to the spirit of what these stories are supposed to be about, and I think you get that in its best and purest sense with the big characters of the Phantom and the Shadow and Doc Savage and the other legends of the pulp era. So these are wonderful ways to become acquainted with the character, we get reacquainted with the world of the Phantom, and just have a wonderful time with it, which is a really nicely taught and fun adventure. It's fun adventures are something that just don't exist anymore, and they need to. And the pulp era has so much in terms of untapped riches that that's why I think more and more people are becoming fascinated by the pulp era characters and the sort of spirit of adventure that's maintained throughout them, and the sense of freedom that you have in just being able to tell really nice little stories and good adventures that are fulfilling in that sense. Having a fulfilling adventure is something that it's a lost art, and these books go a long way in trying to bring that sort of spirit back. So that's I think the most rewarding aspect to reading these. So if you've read any of the Avon Phantoms or you're interested in these, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, happy phantoming, and thank you ever so much for watching.